Mrs. Yarroda Bertie.
Ave Satanist! Hail Satan! Hail Satan! Hail Satan!
Greetings, heathens. Welcome to Hail Satan. This is the podcast exploring Satanism, culture, and life in general through the eyes of modern Satanists. My name is Joseph Rose, and I will be your host today. I'm a member of an independent congregation called Satanic Delco, and I'm also a member of the Satanic Temple. Today on the show, I'm going to do my best to answer some questions that have been submitted by some of you guys. First things first, let me just mention some new patrons that have signed on to support the show. We've got Ashley, Siobhan, Darwin, Andrew, Brianna, Prissy Witch, Gary, Callie, Heather, Christopher, and Kaylee J. Thank you all very much. I love and appreciate the support, and I look forward to interacting with all of you a bit more in the Facebook group and Zoom and the Discord. Y'all are the best. And I'm sorry if I mangled any of your names. My bad. Before I forget, let me just mention our website. You should stop by hailsatanpodcast.com. You'll find links to all the stuff, right? You can join us on social media. There's a form right on there to send your emails. And there's a link to join the Patreon where you get all kind of stuff. You know, there's different tiers. You get some discounts and bonus content and the Greetings from Hell postcards drawn by our member in Satanic Delco, Veronica. She's done a great job. Everybody loves these things. So get in there and have some fun. Now, let's get into some questions. In a couple of cases, people have sent in more than one question, which is totally fine. First up is Emmy. I believe Emmy wrote in a couple of questions here. She asks, does the Satanic Temple's Baphomet statue properly represent your satanic spirit? That's an interesting question. I do really like TST's Baphomet. I think the statue itself is beautiful and pretty fun to look at. I also really enjoy the way it was employed to provide a balance of sorts with the Ten Commandments monument, even though that never happened and it probably never will happen. The one part of it that bothers me is the male chest. I understand the reason that TST removed the breasts or, didn't include them. They say they didn't want the opposition to be able to use the breasts as a way to say that the sculpture was obscene and have more reason to keep it away. But really, with the countless examples of naked statues all over the country, I don't think that was ever going to be the reason why a satanic sculpture was kept away. I think fundamentally it was more of a compromise than I would have been comfortable making, but it's theirs, and it's still a pretty cool statue. So I would say that while I enjoy the overall aesthetic, there was a bit too much of a compromise to represent my satanic spirit. And Emmy has another one here. She writes, for many religions, there is an official religious, sacred, holy book. I know TST doesn't have any official literature, rather a collection of suggested reading. Is there any specific book that you recommend modern Satanists read? I've heard a lot of people suggest Speak of the Devil by Joseph Laycock and The Happy Satanist by Lilith Starr. Do you also suggest these? Do you suggest any others? What are your thoughts on the whole idea of suggested reading? Okay. Speak of the Devil and The Happy Satanist are both good books, and they're very different from one another. Joe Laycock's book, Speak of the Devil, is a sort of authorized history of early TST. And by authorized, I mean there's nothing in the book that TST really didn't want in the book. There are details and sides to stories that aren't told in that book, and if they were, TST wouldn't be as supportive of that book as they are. But still, it's definitely worth a read if a history of TST is what you want. And The Happy Satanist is much more personal in nature. The focus and strength of that book really is the self-empowerment angle, which she accomplished pretty well. I would recommend both books, but neither of them fill the place of a sort of religious text. I know that Lucian Greaves has been putting together some sort of book for some time now, but I don't think it's exactly going to be a TST-flavored satanic Bible or anything like that. I could be wrong. I guess we'll see eventually. Things like Paradise Lost and Revolt of the Angels are on TST's reading list, and they're worth reading for sure, but depending on your taste, you might not find them to be the most pleasant to read, mostly because of their age and the style of writing and language that comes with that. And I also kind of like that there isn't a Bible or some definitive text that defines our religion. It's one of the many ways that our religion is different from so many others, and that's probably a good thing, in my opinion. Also, the problem with a book like that is that it can never really change. You can release new versions over time, but those things are in print and out there in the world forever, basically. Maybe we're better off without one concrete text at the core of our religion. One of your questions was, what are your thoughts on the whole idea of suggested reading? I think the idea of suggested reading is fine, and those things that get suggested might help someone find deeper meaning or enjoyment of the subject. I would be much more weary of required reading. I know of at least one Friends of TST group out there that requires people to read the Satanic Bible to be a part of their group. If you find yourself in a group like that, just run from the crazy before it's too late. That's what I would say. And Emmy has one last question in here. She wrote, Tenet number 1, one should strive to act with compassion and empathy toward all creatures in accordance with reason. What is your opinion on how this applies to our dietary choices? Should we all be vegan so that we're being compassionate and empathetic toward all creatures? Or should we simply choose foods that cause the animals to suffer less in captivity if we can afford it and it makes sense to buy it? All right. There are two important things to focus on here. One of them is the part of the tenet that says in accordance with reason. And the other is tenet number 5, which reminds us that beliefs should conform to one's best scientific understanding of the world. And of course, humans are omnivores. We're animals. We're not better than any other species. We're different. Just like an ant is different from a tiger, from an eagle, and so on. Would it be compassionate or reasonable to intend to make an animal suffer? Of course not. But I believe that the true intent of the vast majority of humans is simply to eat meat like we have biologically evolved to do, not to make an animal suffer. And most individuals never actually make an animal suffer. An argument one could make would be to somehow connect or relate our desire to eat meat with the undeniable horrors of factory farming. And that's simply not a reasonable argument, especially when intent matters so much in a discussion about compassion and empathy. Humans have a lot of issues to deal with, and an exploding population is just one of them. Factory farming grew from a need to meet the food demands of such a large, growing population. So is it reasonable for a compassionate person to make use of animal products even if they may have come through the factory farming system in some way? In my opinion, yes, It is, especially because no widespread alternative system exists. Now, having said that, I think it's very important to work on solving the many issues that exist with factory farming. There is a lot of room for improvements there, and I think we should be making those improvements. That means the treatment of the animals, processing standards, and everything on down the line. Emmy, thank you for your questions. Next up is Dana. The intro music to the podcast is awesome and infectious. Can you tell me what song it is and where I can get it? Now, this might actually be the number one most asked question that I get. So, the intro song to this podcast is something I made just for that purpose, for the show. I sampled and cut up some old stuff from the 60s, and I programmed the beat, and I mashed it all together, and there it is. People have asked if I would make it available as a song or a ringtone or something, so I will look into doing that. I haven't yet, but stay tuned. Thank you, Dana. Next up is Eric. My very Christian mother is coming from out of state to visit. It's her first time meeting my 7-month-old son. My wife and I are both members of the Satanic Temple. We have merch all around the house. I want to remove the TST paraphernalia to not cause an argument with my insanely devout mother. My wife says Tenet 4 covers our right to offend and says we shouldn't care what she thinks. I'd rather hide the items from view and avoid the confrontation because it's not worth my time. Things to consider. My mom is a bit crazy with religion. She booted me from her house at age 17 for not going to church. She's been physically and mentally abusive, and she is controlling. I am torn, and my wife says she will go along with my wishes because it's my mother. Am I in the wrong? Can I get your viewpoint? All right, Eric. This is a great question, but it is obviously a very personal one. I can tell you what I would do, but at the end of the day, your relationships are unique and personal to you, so of course, you'll have to find your own way through. If it were me, this wouldn't even be a concern at all, because a person who I can confidently say is controlling, physically abusive, mentally abusive, and threw me out of my home as a child for not following her religion would never, ever step foot in my fucking house or near my child. But okay, let's assume if someone does want to let an abusive person into their home and near their child for some reason. I can't imagine a scenario where it would be reasonable to have to alter or hide who you are or what your home and your wife's home looks like to appease anyone at all, let alone a person who fits that terrible description. If who you are and how you choose to make your home isn't acceptable or respected by some person, why in the world would that ever be a person you would go out of your way to appease or impress? There's just no part of me that would ever go along with any of that for even one moment. Thank you, Eric. We've got one from Robert that came through Instagram. Robert says, I love your podcast and the spread of positivity that Satanic Delco has done. Sad that I live in Northeast PA and it's a bit of a long shot. I have a question about your TST chapter episode. If you think that TST has contradicted itself and seems more egotistical than trying to spread its message and inform others, why join then? It seems you were frustrated when explaining it, and I was just wondering why you were still a member. Thank you. That is a good, fair question, Robert. There is an important distinction that I make that maybe not everyone makes. It's a matter of who one is referring to when they say the Satanic Temple. To me, there is the Satanic Temple HQ. That means the organization itself as represented by the things included on their website, in their newsletter, and all of the official sources of information that they put out. That is the organization that I'm a member of. And the primary reason I'm a member of that organization is the 7 tenets. Beyond that, I also really like the majority of what the group stands for in relation to its activism and the inspiration it takes from romantic Satanism. I don't necessarily support or agree with everything TST does, certainly not, but the majority of it, and definitely the 7 tenets. Now, on the other hand, we have the chapters and friends of groups. In my eyes, these are not TST. These groups exist primarily to raise awareness and money for TST. Functionally, many of them are little more than Facebook groups full of memes, reposted baffirmations, drama, silly bureaucracy, people giving each other fancy titles and committees, and they are unfortunately often led by misguided people who are attracted to having their name attached to the big popular name brand in modern Satanism, the Satanic Temple. That's the one, right? And as I've said before on this show, the attraction to getting to latch on to that big name brand of TST is so strong that these group leaders are willing to sacrifice any ability to be independent or really benefit their community. To me, that represents wildly misplaced priorities that are in direct contradiction to the essence of the 7 tenets and Satanism in general. Now, I'm speaking in general terms here. Are there cool people leading some of these groups? Probably. Are some of them really fun and active and impactful? I'll give the benefit of the doubt and say maybe. But I've seen so much bad behavior from the people that are in charge of leading these groups. When a person chooses to have their group function in such a limited, controlled way in exchange for access to the name brand, in my opinion, that's all you need to know about that person's priorities. Every single person starting or leading a group is faced with 2 options. A, be official, do less, follow rules, and get to use the logo. Or B, be independent, do as much as you want, fuck arbitrary authority, but you have to build it on your own and you don't get to use the name brand. It's a tough choice for some. It's an easy choice for me. I didn't attach myself to Satanism because I wanted less autonomy or because I liked arbitrary authority. I get a lot of people joining Satanic Delco after they've already experienced time in one of the regional Friends of groups or chapters, and those folks get to see how extremely different the 2 experiences are. To anyone out there who is a member of a Friends of group or a chapter, how active is your group? How often are you guys collaborating on projects and communicating in real time while cultivating a genuine sense of community? Over the last year or so, what was the most important, meaningful, or even just really fun thing that your group has accomplished? If you don't have any good answers to those, you're in the wrong group. And if the only answer to that has something to do with raising funds for TST, then that's wasted potential, and I think that's really sad. Robert, thank you for your question. I hope I've clarified. Eric writes in, do you see the need for Satanism or satanic community in a non-religion influenced society? I'm from a little village in Saxony, which is in East Germany. East Germany is sometimes called the most atheistic place on earth, with Saxony having 71% atheists and about 15% Christians in the population. Like in my case, many people in my home region never knew many religious people. But I think the satanic community is really interesting, even though I don't have many interactions with religion anyway. Greetings from Germany. Okay, Eric. There are parts of modern Satanism that come from a reaction or rebellion against Christianity or the involvement of Christianity with government. But that's certainly not the whole story. People are attracted to Satanism or parts of Satanism for all kinds of different reasons. And just having a group of people that you are aligned with, that's an important part of the beginnings of community. So it doesn't have to be a reaction to anything, and so it doesn't need to function as a direct counterpart to a very religious population. So I would say, yeah, there is, I don't know if need is the word I would use, but it certainly seems reasonable to have satanic community even in a society that isn't overly religious in other ways. I think people can benefit from having a satanic community if those are things that they align with and draw personal benefit from. All right, moving on. We've got a few questions from Miles. Miles writes, what long-term goals or ambitions do you have for Satanic Delco? As it continues to grow, how will you balance the ambitions of the group with those of the individuals who comprise it? Okay. I think the overall vibe, flow, and output of any successful group is going to be defined by some healthy combination of the personality of the leadership and the personality of the rest of the community as a whole. In our group in Satanic Delco, rather than taking on the role of some shot caller guy, I just serve as more of a curator for the group. I collect ideas that came from members and myself, and I present them to the group in a way where we can just vote on things or discuss them in some way. That usually comes out with a pretty healthy balance of things that most of us can genuinely get behind. That could be anything from what movie do we watch on movie night, or what kind of charity should we work for next, or which t-shirt design should we make. And even all of that sounds kind of simple, but the glue that really holds it together and makes it work is the relationships that we form with each other over time. It just comes with a sense of familiarity and trust. Many of us get on the Zoom calls every week and spend time together. How many people can say they sit down for hours with like 20 of their friends every week? We get to learn about one another and just form connections. You'll always have a more natural respect for the feelings and opinions of your friends than you might some random name on a computer screen. So we just take the time to become friends. We have the Facebook group, the Discord server, gatherings for the local people, the Zooms. I'm mailing shit to people's houses like it's 1986. You know, we just have plenty of opportunities to interact with one another and make it so everyone has a chance to shape the group in some way. And holy fuck, did that even answer the question, Miles? I don't know. But that's what came to mind. Miles also writes in, between the podcast, the Facebook and Discord groups, the weekly Zooms, charity, etc., how Satan and Satanic Delco have you pretty involved? What's the thing you enjoy doing the most? What's the most personally rewarding aspect of it all? What keeps you motivated? It's really just about the community itself, I think. I love interacting with everyone in all the ways that we do, like we just talked about, and getting to know everyone. I get especially pumped about any type of creative project that we do, like the Greetings from Hell postcards, for example. And I always talk about our weekly Zoom chats. I think those are great. And with the podcast, I really like the Ask a Satanist episodes like this, because sometimes they really get me thinking in new or more direct ways about how I feel about certain topics or why I feel the way I do about them. And it's also cool when I get to have a guest on and I can learn a bit from their perspective too. I like it all. And Miles also writes in, number 3, under what circumstances, if any, should loyalty to the satanic brand take precedent over charitable participation? If an opportunity arises for the group to improve lives or affect social change in some tangible way, but our use of satanic imagery fully excludes us from participating, should we choose to put the devil horns down for the greater good? That's an interesting one. I think we always have both options, right? As individuals, or even as a group, we can always choose how and when to benefit a charity or whatever it might be. Doing it as Satanic Delco is just its own thing. I'd be lying if I said that doing good deeds in the name of Satan didn't put a special little grin on my face that might not have been there otherwise. But yeah, I like to think that we can draw that line in a responsible way and do the right thing. Luckily, I don't think it's a choice we'll need to make very often. And just speaking for myself, let me add that being part of Satanic Delco, just having that outlet has made me more charitable than I might have been otherwise. You know, we all do our own little thing here or there. You give some money to a thing, you click a button on the internet, or you hand a few bucks to a guy somewhere. You know, we do these little things. But having the group and knowing that the group has become an outlet for doing those kind of things on a slightly larger scale has just created more motivation for me personally to do more charitable things. So I think it's caused an even greater benefit to the community around us than it would have without us. So thank you, Miles. Very good questions. All right, I've got one last question here from Venus. Venus writes, as a hedge witch and a Satanist, I always get questions of how I can balance the line between science and the belief of something beyond the veil. I definitely believe in an afterlife behind the veil, an ancient force that nature depends on, and ancient deities which I draw from and give to in my practice. But I also full-heartedly believe there is no God or Satan that rules over us, especially in the modern world. What is your opinion on this, and have you ever heard of other witches who are members of the Satanic Temple? Do you think there can be a balance, or do you think my beliefs outside of science go against the tenets? Okay, there's a bit to unpack there, and I do see questions and conversations similar to this fairly often. You're asking for my opinion, so I'll give that. But also, let me be clear about the fact that my opinion doesn't really matter. I'm going to do my Satanism my way, and every other individual is going to do Satanism their way. And when everything is working like it should, all of that is totally okay. And that is, of course, one of the cooler aspects of our Satanism. So, my personal opinion is that any religion or group that has clearly defined characteristics should be a thing that fits who you are, rather than you trying to mold yourself into it. So if the definition or requirements of religion A, we'll call it, is that it's for people who believe in X, Y, and Z, but you only believe in X and Y, well, then according to the creators of that religion, it isn't a fit for you. And one might be thinking, but religion A is so cool, and it's almost a fit. Maybe can we just fudge the definition a bit so that I can call myself a part of it anyway? Well, I would say that calling yourself part of something is far less important than how you really feel and what you really believe. To me, the person that only believes in X and Y simply doesn't fit the description of religion A. And there's nothing at all to feel bad about there. These titles are not all that important. And the Satanic Temple actually addressed this directly in their most recent June of 2021 newsletter. It included a little tenet study in the newsletter, which says the following. A frequent question we receive is, can I do X as a member of TST, where X is holding certain beliefs, affiliating with other organizations or faiths, or celebrating non-TST holidays? Satanism is about liberation and freedom. If you embrace the spirit of the tenets we espouse, then there is no reason you should deprive yourself of something that brings you joy and provides your life with meaning as long as it does not infringe on the rights of others. So, the overall vibe you get from reading that is one that is very inclusive. But they do make it a point to include the part that says, if you embrace the spirit of the tenets we espouse. And one of those tenets that provides the entire backbone of the religion is, of course, beliefs should conform to one's best scientific understanding of the world. One should take care never to distort scientific facts to fit one's beliefs. So when you say that you believe in an afterlife and ancient deities, you just have to ask yourself if that belief comes from our best scientific understanding of the world, or if belief is leading the way in the form of a blind faith. Is there more or less evidence on earth of the Christian God compared to an afterlife or ancient deities? I'd say that there's the exact same amount of evidence for all of those, which would be none at all. There is no evidence of the Christian God's existence. There is no evidence of an afterlife, and there is no evidence of ancient deities, according to our best scientific understanding of the world. The important thing is that you feel good about what you believe. What titles you use or what clubs you want to be a part of are totally up to you. And I'm certainly not a gatekeeper for Satanism. And that is all I've got for you this week. I know it's a bit of a shorter episode this week, but don't worry, I'll be back before you know it. Thank you, Venus, and thank you everyone for contributing and listening and supporting the show. If you've got a moment, please visit HailSatanPodcast.com. Drop me an email, hit me up on Instagram, and please stay safe out there if you could. Hail Satan.
Evil free service.